This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
All right, so obviously a very, very busy weekend here in Rhode Island, not only with Pride, but also Juneteenth. And hopefully if you got out to those events or both of them, you had a spectacular time. I had a great performance on Saturday night over in Warren at the Galactic Theater. It was great to meet some of you guys and much more ahead on the music side. But for today, welcoming back someone who became almost like a cast member here on Bartholomew Town during the thick of COVID-19, and that's Dr. Daniel Munoz. Of course, the doctor running for governor as a Democrat. He ran in 2018 as an independent. And look, let's be honest. There are people who are unsure or questioning the doctor's involvement in this race. And I think you could make an argument that if he were to enter into the General Assembly or something of that sort, that he'd be such a valuable asset to our community in those capacities that, and almost like a surefire winner, in many different races. So I think there are different reasons why people assess the Munoz campaign and say, why is he in this thing? But as I've said here on Bartholomew Town a number of times, as we advance in our political discourse, not only in terms of this election, but just in general, speaking from a position of experience, but also from a position of, quite frankly, having nothing to lose, not having to walk that tightrope and play the political games, is extraordinarily valuable to our democracy. It's extraordinarily valuable to our lives. And that's exactly what Dr. Munoz does. It may make you uncomfortable at a certain level, depending on your position in life or in the state or whatever. But, the guy is as authentic as it gets, in my opinion. And I think in the opinion of many others. And so adding him into the mix in the gubernatorial race, in the Democratic primary in particular, it changes where this race goes. And we saw it play out, I think, more than in any other situation at the most recent forum at the Jewish Alliance, where he was loaded with specifics and specific answers to programmatic change opportunities, while other candidates had to kind of dance around the issues. And when you have somebody in a race that is willing to combine experiential ideals with a vision that challenges institutions of power, that changes the dynamics of the race. And at minimum, it forces the front runners and the mainstream candidates to respond in one way or another to the notions being put forth by that, I guess for lack of a better term, outsider type candidate. So that's what the Munoz campaign brings, at least from my perspective. And I think a lot of you would probably agree with that. That that win or lose, this campaign adds a tremendous amount of importance and vision to this Democratic primary. So my message is enough of the nonsense of why is this guy in the race? Why is this person even engaged? Leave it to the front runners to be the combatants. I mean, it's time to move past that anyway, right? But it's also, on a specific level, I think this guy has proven time and time again, okay, that he has the ability to, at minimum, move the dynamics and the specifics of what is being discussed and what is being put forth by other candidates and by the state as a whole. We saw that in COVID-19 with his role in the Equity Council. So I'm bullish on Dr. Munoz. And other people are going to say, you're an idealist, you're not realistic, you're not practical, you're not this, that, and the other. Why does it have to come down to, campaigns based explicitly on fundraising capabilities, initial polling data, willingness to work with the existing structures of power? Seriously. And you have to ask yourself that question as well. Now, I'm not saying that other campaigns should be dismantled or that there's, I'm not endorsing anyone here. But let the race play out enough of the nonsense. Let the race play out. Because I think there's going to be a major shift. I think you're going to see at least one, if not two, candidates exit this race within the next 6 to 8 weeks. And Dr. Munoz won't be one of them, is my prediction. You're going to see at least one, if not two, of the major candidates in the Democratic primary depart this race. And then, as it continues to play out, we as observers will observe and understand what's happening and make decisions based on the situation in front of us. But there's no need to prognosticate on a personal level, on a professional level, about the role that any of the candidates play, Matt Brown included. Let it play out, because the more that it plays out, the more interesting and acute the discussion is going to be. There are radical policy differences when it comes to the stadium alone. Just look at the stadium and listen to Munoz answer on this and compare it with what you see from, we just had Secretary Gorbea on. She had an answer that's closer to Munoz. Compare that to McKee. Those are major policy differences and major differences of vision for the state's interaction with outside dollars, the state's vision for the future, and the state's willingness to spend taxpayer money and enter into long-term agreements that have a lot of unknown, a lot of uncertainty. You'll also hear a major endorsement that Dr. Munoz just received here on this podcast episode today. So lots ahead. As always, great to spend time with you here on Bartholomew Town. Remember, you can follow the podcast on social media. Just search for me, Bill Bartholomew. Coming up later this week, Inside Rhode Island Cannabis returns, presented by Pure Vita Labs. Visit purevitalabs.com for more information. And then next week, another episode of Inside Rhode Island Public Health, presented by Commonwealth Care Alliance, delivering uncommon care to Rhode Islanders. Okay, without further ado, let's get to it. Dr. Luis Daniel Munoz, back on B-Town. All right, so Dr. Luis Daniel Munoz is somebody who the Bartholomew Town audience is completely familiar with, because you were such a key contributor during our COVID-19 coverage. Felt like every day you were on explaining not only the medical side of things, but also arguably as, if not more importantly, the policy side of things. And you on your own filled this incredibly important void of just being a spokesperson for so much of what was being missed by the administration during COVID-19. And quite frankly, you shifted policy, you and a few others, to focus on some of these key areas, whether you're talking about transportation, translation, just access in a broad sense. Now, after running for governor as an independent in 2018, you're in the Democratic primary running against, 4 other candidates. And you find yourself in this interesting spot where, in all of the forums that I've attended, in general, in the way you've approached your campaign, you're not tap dancing here. You're out there speaking about what's important to you and what's important to the community. So welcome back to the show, as always. And talk about the campaign so far and what it's been like running as a Democrat this go around.
Yeah, excuse me. It's been interesting. I running as an independent. I stated my points in this cycle and in last cycle. There are crooked political operatives throughout the state, and excuse me, and running as an independent for me was a statement that we can run on ideas, programmatic changes, on a value system without having to adhere to the same game of politics that Rhode Island, is known for. And we've actually alluded to what happened in 2017, specific to that incident, in a recent documentary that we released, which is accessible on our website as well, at governor2022.com. Running as a Democrat this time it is interesting in that, first off, I know why I'm running, right? And I know that this is about really focusing on what is the heart of the Democratic Party. And from my perspective, it should be in grassroots progressivism. How do we build the infrastructure that has been dismantled by cronyism and corruption over the past several decades? It is facing Goliath, though, right? And Goliath is a system that is designed to exclude outside candidates. And when I say outside, it is the working, it is the historically marginalized, it is anyone that challenges the status quo. Being one of 5 Democrats, I still was the first to announce. I was the first to present programmatic changes. My website has had everything that I believe in, how I plan to implement them over the past year. So now, I find it very interesting that there's a kind of acceptance of the need for voices to be included, which I can appreciate. But our voices have been out here, right? People have been making noise for years. This isn't about just a voice. This is about people being at the helm that understand what it means to struggle and to ultimately fight to ensure that Rhode Islanders are not struggling. So from my perspective, it is not just a needed step that I've taken to run in the Democratic Party, but frankly, this is a step in terms of challenging the political game within the Democratic Party in order to change it altogether, right? To break the game, to dismantle it. So it's been good. I've enjoyed it, and I think we're making more than just waves. I'll be speaking at the convention. I was nominated and was seconded, so I'll be given time with the other candidates. Today, we are announcing that Andrew Yang and the Forward Party are endorsing us. So we have a national endorsement that is going to be released as well in an article, hopefully this morning. It's exciting news. And look, we are the most underfunded campaign. And I would say that's also by design. We dedicated time to making phone calls, but what are we going to spend 12, 16 months on the phone? Are we going to spend it with the people? And so if the power centers in the state of Rhode Island prefer to prop up insiders, and I say insiders because even candidates that have not run before, frankly, have this kind of insider collective that is building around them. If that's what they want, let them fund them. But what I know is this: in a 5-way split race, in one of the largest recessions that this country is going to face, and the only time we're ever going to be given $1.1 billion for doing nothing, absolutely nothing.
Right.
This is the time. And if Rhode Islanders want someone that's going to fight to ensure that money gets to Rhode Islanders, then they'll vote for Munoz.
One thing that's been, and that's major news, by the way, on the Andrew Yang, and this will certainly, if nothing else, draw additional attention to you, no question about it. And whether you're talking nationally or even locally, where did that come from? How did you make that connection? And because that's a major shift in a way. I mean, you've certainly had endorsements from national groups and so on and so forth, but correct me if I'm wrong, but that seems like the biggest ticket name, if you will, that has gotten behind the campaign.
Presidential candidate, New York City mayoral candidate, and frankly, someone Brown graduate, someone who has certainly challenged the status quo. People can have their opinions about what programmatic changes might be effective or not based on their implementation. But the fact is that, Andrew Yang has had the courage to step onto platforms where people have not wanted to include him, and he has pushed forward with solutions. And so I've said time and time again, what we are doing here is being recognized. And I think it's interesting in Rhode Island, there have been columns in particular, or columnists that have chosen to kind of disregard, right, I would say the value, not just of ideas, but of implementation plans and the courage that it takes. But that's not true for national bodies. And, I'm grateful that how that happened is by us just doing the work and being recognized, and then now having people that are standing beside us within the state and outside of the state as well.
You fought that for the duration of the 2018 election. Now here in the 2022 election, I've seen it as well, where, there's just this notion of, the Dr. Munoz's campaign, the dollars aren't there, or the initial polling data is not there, whatever it is. So you should get out of the race. When I saw you at the most recent forum at the Jewish Alliance, I felt like you were so in command of the issues and able to answer on specifics that anybody who doubted why you were in the race should have understood, this is why he's in the race. It's to challenge and to change the tone and the dynamics and enter into specificity on certain questions. Is it because you feel like, hey, I don't have to play this game of being in the front runner and straddling the line between the old guard and the new guard and the business sector and the working class or whatever? Do you feel like you can just speak, not not even your mind, but speak to the specifics and have specific policy ideas that might offend some people or be scary to some people? Is that a fair summary?
If people are uncomfortable with the truth, then it's my duty to press even harder. Because we're not going to move forward unless we all acknowledge the truth. That goes for our history in the state of Rhode Island in terms of past history and the abuses to our indigenous people and African-American descendants of slaves. And that goes to our present history and the disregard and indifference we've had for micro businesses in the state. Every issue is a working class issue. And that's true for 95% of Rhode Islanders, right? For the people who aren't being born into wealth and who do not necessarily have an obligation to work, to pay for rent, pay for food, or pay for their mortgage. So that's the way I see it. Every issue is a working class issue. There is no line to straddle when we acknowledge that. Right. When we acknowledge that, we can see that the stock market's out of whack. We can see that the commodities, their prices are increasing. Every deal that's made for development, including the one in Pawtucket with the stadium, is gonna fall on the shoulders of the working. And unless we have a governor that is willing to push against cronyism and really think carefully about how we structure Commerce Rhode Island, direct funds towards the micro businesses, get Rhode Islanders out of this minimum wage poverty trap and towards a livable wage. Not that it can be sustained for 20 years, but in the short term, if we can create these programs and then create a pipeline out of poverty, Rhode Islanders is going to be better off than other states. It's going to come back from the recession faster than anyone else. And it's going to come back better because we say build back better. We need to come back better. And frankly, our comeback has been long coming for about a century. So it's about time that we do the work now. And what you saw that day is someone that has, I realize that stage forces a lot of people to place themselves in a box because they're concerned that on the other side of it, they're going to lose votes. I'm on that stage to lead, not to follow. And the forum prior to that with RIPAC, the questions were contained to 60 seconds. And it was a business community. And within 60 seconds, while it had to be more structured, and I would say, unfortunately, you lose authenticity when it's that structured, still I pressed on issues of taxing, the top 1%. Still, I pressed on issues of the tax loopholes and the need for tax credits for the working class. So no matter what forum I'm in, I try my best within the structure of the forum to press, and I'll continue to do that. I
think a lot of people there was a shock value headline aspect to what you called for in terms of a number for minimum wage, but I don't know that everyone really got or paid attention to how you would get to a $25, $30, $35 minimum wage using whether it's ARPA dollars or other funds to supplement businesses. Can you sort of explain your vision for how we would have a minimum wage that is like double what it is right now? How would that work?
Right. So when we talk about minimum wage, what I find interesting is if we had accounted for inflation, it would have been about $25 now. Right.
Yeah.
But we didn't.
Definitely.
So now we're just fighting for 15. And when you think about what the MIT formula for livable wages, and you look at $19, which is being pushed by an opponent, that's a livable wage for a college student. No kids, no obligations, right? But you still, when you have 1, 2 kids, you get up to the $25, $35 range. So if we don't do anything, what's going to happen? I want to put that up front. If we do not do anything, we continue to see gentrification, and not just in the urban core. We're going to see people pushed out of Westerly, third generation Richmond residents pushed out of Richmond, right? People are paying rent. Davisville and North Kingstown. So if we don't do anything, people are going to be pushed out of their homes. People are going to struggle to eat. And then what happens then? What kind of pressure does that put on our infrastructure here in the state of Rhode Island? So what do? Well, we have these dollars for a short period of time. Can we supplement wages? So how do we do that? We restructure Commerce Rhode Island. We create programs for micro businesses that have less than 10 employees, as an example. We provide an opportunity for those businesses to receive supplemental wages for their employees. Their employees who want to participate in that program to get that extra $10 initially, right, on their hourly wages, would also essentially have to agree to participate in some type of program at CCRI's Rhode Island Promise program. It doesn't have to be a 2-year program. It doesn't have to be a full-time. It could be a 3-month, 6-month, or it could be a 2-year associate. So a certification program or associates. The key is, how do we create a pipeline out of poverty? And that's ultimately the issue here. People say, you're just giving money. Like, no, we're giving money and we're creating a pathway. But we have to change two things at once. We have to change the way we think about how we support micro businesses, and we have to change the way we think about free education, because Rhode Island Promises program really is not open to non-traditional students, those who cannot be full-time, those who have been out of school for several years. So what I say is, let's bring Rhode Island jobs training programs into Rhode Island Promise, open Rhode Island Promise up, connected to our supplemental wage program, with Commerce Rhode Island being the overseer of that program for micro businesses. And as these employees work one job, improve the quality of their lives, expand their skill sets, there's going to be an impact on those local economies, whether it is that the businesses can scale or that other businesses from out of state are attracted due to the talent pool that's increasing. But something good is going to happen when we focus on building people up. So that's how we do it. How we make it sustainable is when that something good happens. Call it the multiplier effect at a grassroots level.
Yeah. And you could almost make an argument, I'm not saying that this would be the right choice, but that non-traditional students need a Rhode Island Promise more than traditional students. I'm not sure about numbers. This is totally anecdotal, but sometimes you graduate from high school. If you're somebody who's going to college, there's a lot of scholarship opportunities. There's a lot of external opportunities. And sometimes there's a lot of personal wealth in a family that can help a kid go to school full time. If you're a single mother working 1-2 jobs, there's a lot less opportunity for you to find that pathway out of poverty. So it's almost shocking that the program doesn't or didn't initially include that marginalized population.
And it's by design. It's by design. And this is my concern, that whenever we focus on people historically marginalized, the working class, single mothers, single parents, it's always this, even in the Democratic Party, there's almost this fallback on, well, how do we make it sustainable? And yet we give tax breaks to these large corporations. One of my opponents comes out of CVS. CVS had about $50 million in subsidies in the past decade. And most of the salary positions are coming from out of state. And I appreciate people who are implants in Rhode Island. I'm grateful that they're here. I hope they stay here. But what about the workers here, right? What about the people looking for employment here? As we give these tax breaks to the big companies, are we really seeing a return on the investment? Now, I would say no. And we need to rethink how we approach commerce, specifically around this time in history, where if we want to come back from this recession, it's going to happen at the local level.
Dr. Lewis, Daniel Munoz running for governor as a Democrat. Let's talk about Tidewater Landing, because it's just the issue of the moment right now. Are you in favor of the deal at any level? Do you think that it's an appropriate use of taxpayer dollars at any level? And what's your just overall take on the project?
No, I'm against it. I'm against the deal with the Superman building as well. 30 years. When you talk about a tax stabilization agreement, I mean that's locking in an entire generation to a bad deal. With the stadium, I think it was pushed through. It just amazes me that so much work went into the opposition for the Paul Sox Stadium, and then out of nowhere, mid-pandemic, this soccer stadium gets pushed through. And when I say it's a bad deal, it is a bad deal. So anybody that was paying attention to 2018 could see that GE, right, the businesses that Governor Raimundo was making deals with, had consolidated. And if you recall, the jobs weren't going to come here that were set to come here. All of the businesses started to retract even before, or condense, even before COVID. You get the pressure of COVID-19, and then you can see that we're going to head towards a recession much faster than before because the bubble was already too big. And yet we lock in a deal where if commodities prices increase, it's on taxpayers, knowing that when things get hard, commodities prices increase. Yeah, that is a bad deal altogether. And I think this is, reflection of cronyism, that we can see what a bad deal is, but because insiders and their donors, want something for their benefit, they're willing to sacrifice generations of Rhode Islanders. When I say sacrifice, I mean put so much pressure on a city and on a state that it's going to be hard for us to come back from that deal, as hard as it was to come back from 38 studios.
Yeah, and with that specific deal, you're counting on at $35 per ticket for a second tier of a sport that hasn't taken off really. It's not an NFL franchise or something like that coming, so it's just there's a lot of risk just in the product as well. The TIF, the notion of the opportunity zone and striking while the iron's hot, this notion that Pawtucket is, that the state, the taxpayers owe Pawtucket this because the Paw Sox deal got away. Your take on all of that?
Kobe Dennis and several, and there are others. Pablo Rodriguez has a business downtown Pawtucket, a great Argentine food restaurant. Kobe Dennis has a barber shop. Kobe Dennis and other investors are opening up Onyx July 1st, right? Kind of very vintage style, nightclub, kind of prestige level, right? So really cool stuff happening in downtown Pawtucket. With that said, that is grassroots, right? That is starting with people collectively coming together through kind of these cooperative formats and building things up for the community. The stadium is a top-down approach with the weight that does not care whether the city itself can bear that weight on its shoulders. Pawtucket's an interesting place too, because last year they paid $1.1 million for a statue of a colonizer, William Blackstone, and they kept it up. Now that's cronyism too. First off, the statue is not worth $1.1 million. And two, it is in the at a time where racial justice and the discussion around it had been amplified, and still the city did that. Pawtucket has a lot of issues, and the mayor could like what I'm saying or not. But if you are not working with the community to determine how the local economy can grow that with the best interest of the community in mind, then it's going to fail. And that's anywhere in the state. And that frankly isn't this approach they've taken in Pawtucket is not unique to Pawtucket. We've seen it across other municipalities too.
On housing, I mean, right now it's, everyone who's paying attention at any level knows that this is complete nonsense in terms of the price points that are being established. Superman falls into that, but it goes way beyond Superman. Like you said, this is in South County. This is in the Blackstone River Valley. This is everywhere right now. Rents are out of control. Purchase prices seem likely to crash based on the numbers that people are getting. I don't see how it couldn't. What's step one in addressing housing as in a Munoz administration?
Yeah, going to every single city in town and diving deep into the zoning laws and how we can work with them to address those issues. Portsmouth has 2.5% low income and medium income housing. Newport solid 15%. North Kingstown gets about 10%. Middletown is less than 10%. East Greenwich is less than 10%. We have towns and cities, mostly towns though, that are not meeting even the minimum requirement for low, medium income. And then when we talk about it in this campaign, you hear everybody talking about affordable housing. Come on, low income housing. And at a statewide level, if we are not collectively working, and I think we can use ARPA dollars. We can incentivize the municipalities to address the housing issues by restructuring some of the zoning laws, by maybe providing them with additional funds for educational infrastructure, right? If this is going to be a negotiation, it should happen in the public, not behind closed doors, but it should also be a very clear negotiation. You do this, and then we ultimately support more with this. And on the other hand, if it's not going to happen, I do think we should be talking at a statewide level. What does rate stabilization legislation look like, especially in the next 5 to 10 years? Because I think that's how long it's going to take to really come back from what we're heading now in terms of this recession.
Education, what's day one look like for you in terms of restructuring? It's not just Providence schools. There's questions statewide. What does it look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's a multi-pronged approach. I mean, infrastructure is always going to be an issue in this state. And unfortunately, I think that's true because we've allowed things to get so bad for so long. So certainly continuing to work with counterparts in government to try to get more funding, even in the form of bonds for the schools themselves to be safe and better. Education funding formula, right? It concentrates poverty. If you look at the way that our funding formula is structured, we can't even use the word equity. Poverty is determined based on whether you have discounted and free lunch. And then that's really the primary tool used. And then you get like language needs and everything else is another line item. But whenever you put something in another line item, it makes it easy to be overshadowed by other things. If we create an education funding formula like the one in Kansas and we combine it with other formats, we can have more things that are weighted and create a weighting system where all of these things, language needs, gifted students, free discounted lunch, all of it is bunched together to determine how much more money per student we should be allocating. And the state should make up the difference. And in Rhode Island, it seems that for the state to do that, which it has to be written into the Constitution that, we need to have equal quality education for every student. I mean, I agree with that. But like, we should have been doing the right thing, right, Bill? Yeah. Like, it blows my mind. Like, we should be doing the right thing. And I hear other counterparts in this race saying they want the constitutional amendment, but they're not stressing the educational funding formula. The educational funding formula is the implementation path of what the Constitution will say, right? And so both those things need to happen. That's day one for me. And then beyond that, I've been a huge proponent of a statewide after-school program. If we want to overcome racism, classism, all of these things that divide cities and towns, and even some parts of certain cities in Rhode Island, we have to bring our youth together, right? We have to allow them to co-create the future. And the way we do that is by housing them in our universities and a statewide after-school program. We completely change the dynamic of how Rhode Island's perceived, how our students kind of perceive themselves in the state by doing that.
Last question, and this comes from asking Republican candidates if they would accept Donald Trump's endorsement. Would you accept President Biden's endorsement?
Yeah, I find this notion of like accepting endorsements or rejecting them interesting because, I'm coming from the perspective of having experienced indifference about my candidacy in 2018, right? Yep. So I'm not going to do jumping jacks with any endorsement. I'm going to work. And if someone acknowledges that I'm doing the work, then thank you for acknowledging it. And then I'm going to continue to do the work. This circus act that people are doing about, can you give me a seal of approval? I am a leader. I am working alongside other community leaders. We don't need anybody's stamp because we're doing the right work. And that's all that matters to me. And then I just want to point out, Bill, if I can, in like 30 seconds here.
Sure.
As a physician in this race, community health infrastructure needs to be built out. I believe that healthcare, as much as housing, is a human right. And if we're not looking forward, understanding that COVID-19 numbers are not being reported because we have no data retrieval infrastructure, things are getting worse. We're going to have another surge. The governor has privatized public health, which started with the Raimondo administration. We need a physician in office to change direction, to ensure that we're serving Rhode Islanders well as it relates to this ongoing, even if it's an endemic. And then moving forward, we need community health infrastructure because the price burden, the cost burden of healthcare is weighing on all working families. And the way we do that in Rhode Island in terms of controls is by the state playing an active role in purchasing the medical products and drugs and ensuring that we are negotiating at that table. So I wanted to say that.
Dr. Daniel Munoz, Democrat candidate for governor of Rhode Island, and always a pleasure. I look forward to having you back on before the election at least once.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bill. Appreciate the opportunity.
Hey, miss something on the pod? Tune into Bartholomew Town on WPRO 99.7 FM, AM 630, and 99.7WPRO.com every Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.